Well, good day everyone, and I hope you're enjoying the material so far to date. For week 2, section B, we're going to go over the requirements for a business plan. And I think as we get into the detail of this, you are going to see how significant a business plan is to your success. So first, why do we need a business plan? Many of you probably might even be in business or are anticipating your business, and you're pretty sure that you know exactly what you're going to do. Well, there are a couple reasons that make business plans really vital. Number one, oftentimes, despite the fact that we really think we understand the industry or understand the business that we're getting into, we might miss some details. The business plan forces us to formalize the thinking behind our processes. It allows us to get into the detail and project exactly what we think we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it. The second reason to develop a business plan is because if we're going to be utilizing investors, or if we need to find money outside of our own resources, often the business plan is going to show our investors that it's worth believing in us. Now, mind you, those investors might be your parents, they might be a bank, they might be some other source that you have. But there's nothing like putting down a plan in writing to really convince people that you know what you're doing and you've considered the things that you should have been considering. The other thing that a business plan will do, it'll force us to see whether or not your strategy is feasible. I've seen a number of different business plans that might have a really exciting idea, but when you start putting the costs and the anticipated revenues together, it was clear it didn't make sense, or that at least additional thoughts had to be put into it. Let's say if you're saying, okay, I'm going to run a business and I plan to be the only employee, yet I expect to keep my business open 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. Truthfully, that might not be feasible. Things might happen to you. Almost by necessity, you need to consider a second employee. Well, if you end up having to use that second employee, there are going to be costs associated with that. And that could be the difference between success and failure of your organization or your business. It really was something you should have anticipated. So again, the feasibility study can be significantly valuable. What are the other things that are addressed in a business plan? We take a look to see, do you know who your customers are and what's of value to them? And we touched on that previously, but a business plan puts it in writing. It looks at how you're going to be distributing or getting your product or service to the client. And then it also outlines some of the financial issues that are important. One of the big things that we see, and it is an important issue, is people have a failure to plan. And the consideration with that is, again, it comes back to people are often, they run their own personal lives from the hip. You know, if no worries, I can take care of anything. As problems come my way, I can address them. And that might work, and it might work very successfully on a personal level. Generally, it's not quite as successful from a business level. Oftentimes, whether it's something like putting aside a rainy day fund or having extra money or resources. Well, let's say your sales are so great, your inventory needs jump up. Oftentimes when you're under a lot of growth, you have to come up with more capital or more money than you expected in order to fund that growth. Your inventory needs to be bigger. Is there money that you can access to fund the growth? That comes back to planning and again, your business plan. The sources of capital, you know, is it the bank who's going to be lending money to you, or is it your best friend? If your best friend is the individual and you need additional money, will they have it for you, or are you going to have to reach out and find another investor? And are these people taking a percentage interest in your business, or is it a loan where you're going to repay them with interest? And can you cover those costs? These are all big issues. Something that often is not considered is, what do you hope for this business to do for you? What's your personal plan? And within those considerations, we want to look at things like, what's your motivation? Why do you want a business? Do you want a business just so you don't have to be an employee for somebody else? Or do you want a business because you really love what you're getting into and you're excited about it? You want to serve or produce in whatever capacity your franchise is addressing. Do you have the skills and resources necessary, or are you going to have to look outside for some of those skills and resources? Just touching on an example like a massage or a company that offers massages. Are you a licensed masseuse, or do you plan on being the manager and administration and you're going to hire talent? If you're going to hire the talent, can you do it at a reasonable rate to where you can cover your overhead, pay them effectively, and have a successful business? Where do your passions lie? Again, if you're passionate about the business you're getting into or about working with people or something, that's a lot different than if you're passionate about getting away from a more structured environment. Now, that's not to say either passion couldn't work for you, but loving the business you're getting into tends to be a little bit more successful. Things like risk tolerance is a huge consideration when you're looking at being a sole proprietor or owning an individual franchise. The risk falls to you. Are you going to have sleepless nights worrying about whether the sales are going to come in this week or this month or this year? Some people don't perform well under that kind of risk. And oftentimes those are the people that probably make better employees than employers or business owners. You need to understand how you're going to feel. There's always that pride of ownership, but there's a significant risk associated with being a business owner. Will you be okay with that? And I do want to throw in at this point that certainly if you are, as we've talked about in the past, there's that risk-reward relationship. And where we see more risk, we tend to see much better opportunity for reward. So if you can deal with the risk associated, again, your potential for an upside can be significant. And we've seen some of our syndicators or franchisors speaking to us about having multiple franchises. And that can really work for you too, because then you're actually benefiting from your skill set and allowing you to expand rather significantly, and the ownership potential there is significant. A couple more points. Working hard. Are you willing to work hard and do what it takes? Because it is significant. It's hard. There are a lot of people out there who have their own franchises who are willing to work really hard at it. And you really need to bring that kind of commitment to the program. And then lastly, you want to consider what the impact of this franchise is on your family life. Because associated with, the working hard and the investing a lot of capital in your franchise, you're going to end up getting a lot of your own time. Oftentimes, especially in the early years, it's more time than you really were planning to spend. Are you willing to sacrifice that time that you could have been spending with your family? Because oftentimes there is that associated franchise. If you're single today and you're saying that's not a concern, might you be married and with a family at some point in the future where you're going to be making adjustments? And that's all fine, but you want to be putting that kind of a plan in place. Okay, so those are kind of the elements associated with a personal plan. Moving on, we remember that we want to be in a position to be gathering information that's going to impact our company or our firm. And again, within that, that environmental scanning consideration, by looking around at our environment, whether it's looking at the economy or looking at the industry, we're going to be in a better position to build a business plan and put in some of the required components to protect us against concerns or risks that we might have anticipated based on our environmental scanning. Things like forecasting are very important to our business. There are various kinds of forecasting, either qualitative or quantitative. And oftentimes, if possible, we try to do a combination of both of those. And again, we're looking at forecasting so we can anticipate sales, we can anticipate our expenses, and make sure that we're going to be operating in the black or the profitability zone rather than in the red, which is the not profitable zone. Forecasting can do things, well, qualitative forecasting, we're going to be looking at how we feel the industry or the recession is, or the industry or the economy is going, or what the experts. Qualitative means it's not number driven. It's more sentiment driven. And again, you want to be collecting those sentiments across a broad range. Your franchisors are often in a position to provide some forecasting because they've got historical data, and often that data is built on quantitative data. Okay, so those are numbers and the hard facts that we look at the past and we kind of project what's going to be happening in the future. And then you can overlay qualitative data over that, or qualitative forecasting. And that's like when your managers kind of get their heads together and you could say something like, yes, the numbers all look like we're going to just hold even, but I have a really good feeling about what's going to be coming up next month. And that the combination of qualitative and quantitative can have a very significant and positive impact on your accuracy with forecasting. As you start putting together a plan or building your plan, you want to make sure that it looks professional. So things like attractive, just to look at. I often see people submit plans to me where they don't even have paragraph breaks. You get this big block of text. And I don't know if any of you have ever received a letter that basically all of the information was smacked into one page and you just saw this big square. But it tends to be a little bit overwhelming. You don't really quite want to read it. When you start doing things like adding cover pages, and it's called breaking out some white space to where it's a pretty presentation, all of a sudden the assessment of your plan goes way up before anybody even starts to read it. So that's important, that professional appearance. You want to make sure that your opinions or positions are supported by data. So you're going to include some research and tell where you got that research from. And then you want to anticipate what your audience might be asking. Again, if you're trying to do a plan for your father or your parents to get money from them, you might be anticipating different concerns than if you're putting together a plan for a lender. Okay? So what are the elements of a plan? We look at things like the cover page. So you're going to have a cover page on your plan. You're going to have an executive summary. Now the role of the executive summary is really to do a one-page review or less, 2/3 of a page, that discusses what the primary points or significant salient facts of your plan are. The idea is an executive reviewing your plan is going to be able to, with just reading that one page, know what's going to make your plan successful. So on the executive summary, that's not where you're going to get into a lot of detail to talk about other considerations. That's coming up later in the body of your plan. The executive summary is maybe like if the lender wants to approve your loan, but it has to go to the bank president can read that one page and say, this looks like it's going to work. At any rate, that's the executive summary. The next section of your plan might do something like address your vision. The vision and the mission statement, which is the third component, tend to go hand in hand, and they look at where you want to be. It's almost that touchy-feely, warm part of your business plan. It's where you're going to inspire and be passionate. You might have a section that talks about your keys to success. What are the things that make you particularly good at this? For example, maybe you're a people person and the franchise that you're looking at really needs a people person at the helm. Maybe you are organizational, very solid in organization, and it's a logistical type, that's a person who's good in logistics will help with the success. Maybe you have a secret recipe that the market will be clamoring for. Bottom line is, in the keys to success, you pull out the things that make you different from the others, what differentiates you. You want to look at what the industry is doing, touch on what your product or service is, incorporate a marketing plan, which actually has quite a bit of detail along, some of the things we've been talking about. You'll look at things like your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, or your SWOT analysis within your marketing plan. that has a tendency to quickly, in a graphical format, lay out what you do particularly effectively and where you might have some weaker points. And remember, it's not so bad to have weaker points if you recognize them and you're in a position to be able to overcome them. Your plan should address your management team, who's going to be supporting these goals, and then it should address the financials, which should include things like preliminary pro formas in regards to balance statements, where your assets and liabilities, what does your income statement look like for maybe the next 1 to 3 years would be a typical range, things of that nature. As you can see, this is a lot of stuff, and that's really what it takes. When you stop and think about the need for how much of your personal time, how much of your money, how much of your passion is going to go into your franchise, believe me when I tell you, spending the time on this kind of work makes sense. I hope you take all of this to heart. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and you have a great day. We'll see you in the next section.